Okay, so let us go ahead and talk just briefly about a interesting little phylum here within the protostomes. That is the phylum Nemertea. So remember, these guys are protostomes. They're Sporilia. Spell that right. Sporilia. And they're members of the Lophocotrozoa. And then they would be in phylum Nemertea. Not a lot here to talk about. Common names, ribbon worms, proboscis worms. Big picture, let me put some key facts here. Big picture, these are all marine species. Not that completely understood. Kind of goofy things. They tend to have just really long cylindrical or flattened bodies. Not the same as the roundworms or the flatworms or those types of things, but other couple things that make them different. There's this very slight cephalization, slight head. So this guy here, you can see this little kind of bulging out on the sides of the neck. That indicates this is the head of this particular ribbon worm. They're going to have a complete digestive system. So mouth all the way down through the anus, food comes in, digestion works its way down, food goes out. But the big key things, let me get to the next slide. The big key feature to identify a member of this particular phylum is the presence of a thing known as a proboscis. This is their feeding tube or feeding structure. So the way it works is the proboscis is kept inside their, if you want to say their throat, and then, let me get the pen out. So here's a proboscis, right there, see that structure there, and it's kind of pulled back inside. And then they have these little sensory hairs, they call them papillae, little sensory hairs on the opening of the mouth area. And then when they detect prey, and these guys go after things like crustaceans, other little worms, marine invertebrates, things like that, they will shoot the proboscis out. So imagine this being an enlargement of that structure. There's our little sensory hairs. And the proboscis is down here, kind of coiled up. And then what will happen is it'll go and it'll shoot out really quick. And there's a little something. You guys decide what that is. Something swimming around in the water. And the proboscis goes out, and then all of a sudden it suctions like a vacuum or a shop vac or somebody giving a bad hickey. It just goes and sucks that prey into the proboscis and then draws it all the way down, gets it down into the digestive system, kills it, digests it, etc. So like I said, kind of weird little group, not very diverse, just one of those interesting weird little marine species that are out there. So depending on the marine environment, not that common either. But is it a group to mention? One of the phylum that sits underneath the Sporilia and the Lophocotrozoa. So, all right. So we are done with all of the Sporilia, all of the Platyzoa, all of the Lophocotrozoa. So what we can do is go done with all of these. We've covered all these groups. We've covered all these phylum. We got it all. Now we're going to take a jump over here to Ectozoa. Take a look at this group. And there's only two phylum that we're going to talk about, the Nematoda and the Arthropoda. So those two phylum sit under the category Ectozoa. All right, now I want you guys to go back to that lecture, the protostome overview lecture. What is the key feature? What makes something an ectozoa? Look that up. I'm not going to fill it in. I want you guys to fill this in. Fill in that blank. All right, so The first phylum to mention under Ectozoa is phylum Nematoda, nematodes. These are the roundworms. These guys are found all over the place. You're going to find roundworms in terrestrial environments, marine environments, and freshwater environments. They are everywhere. Depending on the type, they're good. They do a lot of good things. They're a food source for a lot of things. They play a big role ecologically in a lot of different food chains. Some of them, usually the ones we are more familiar with, are the ones we don't like, and they're parasites. So you go, ugh, that's not good. All right, big feature of nematodes. These guys exhibit a thing known as sexual dimorphism. Oop, let me spell it right. Dimorphism. All right, sexual dimorphism. In sexual dimorphism, one gender is larger than the other. In this case, in this particular group, it's the females that are larger. So I want you guys to start thinking about that and go, okay, what is the advantage for the female to be larger than the male in this particular species? Could ask the same question in other species as well. But that's definitely a feature to remember about Nematoda. Sexual dimorphism, one gender is larger than the other. Other key things we want to think about with these guys. They have a cuticle, that's their skin, that is often, oh, I didn't spell it right. That is resistant to host enzymes. And the cuticle sheds periodically. Their skin comes off, kind of like lizard. Sheds its skin every so often, replaces it with a new skin. But it's also, again, resistant to enzymes, so it makes it difficult for the immune system to get rid of them. When we look at respiration, the gas exchange will occur through the cuticle, so there's no respiratory system here, there's no lungs, things like that. It's simply diffusion of oxygen in, diffusion of carbon dioxide out. They do have a complete digestive system. So there will be a mouth all the way through a complete digestive system, and then an anus where wastes will be expelled. Again, primarily being parasitic, sometimes absorption of nutrients can be through the skin. Just depends on the type of nematode we're talking about here. But in general, most of them, it'll be the mouth, goes through the mouth, through the system, and then comes out the anus. The waste product comes out the anus. We're looking at animals that often have little things called stylets. Oh, get another line here. Stylets are piercing mouth parts. These are little, they're not fangs, but think about them like little pointy things that they can use to stab into the host, to puncture in. Sometimes they use them to hang on, to anchor into the host. A lot of times it's the intestinal wall. And then that way you can't push them out when your digestive system is moving stuff through the digestive system. So it helps them, again, hang on or anchor into the host. So within the Nematoda, we have a couple groups I want to talk about. All of these are parasitic, and they are things that we have the potential to come in contact with. Some of us may have actually been infected with some of these at one point in our lives. I want you guys, especially those of you heading towards healthcare, medical school, pharmacy, etc., I want you guys to think about how would you break the life cycle of these things. That's the challenge, is the life cycle of many of the nematodes spans across multiple species, usually 2 different species a lot of times. So how do we break that life cycle? So start coming up with creative ideas. We need those ideas and those solutions to help improve overall human and public health. So, all right, so the first one to mention is Trichinella. Trichinella primarily will parasitize pigs and or bears. Those are the key hosts for this particular nematode. So we get it. Humans can get a Trichinella infection by eating infected pork, or for those people who might have the opportunity to eat bear meat. But I would think for most of us, it's the pork that puts us at risk. So what will happen is when a pig is infected, the larva of the nematode, the Trichinella, will form a cyst within the muscle tissue of the pig. And it just hangs out and goes into dormancy. So this is the cyst over here. So this is a slide of muscle tissue showing a nematode cysted within the muscle tissue of the animal. So that pig runs around, appears to be healthy and happy and good and grows up and then gets processed into pork chops or sausage, bacon, etc. And that is when we have the potential to come into contact with that cyst. We eat it. If we have not cooked it enough to kill it, to destroy it, to inactivate the cyst and the nematode in it, we then are eating a larval form of the nematode that then can come out of the cyst and begin to parasitize us. So pigs, rodents also can be infected with these guys, but the way this would work is if we picked up, here's the pig meat, we pick it up, we eat it, oh, here it is, I'm sorry. We eat that pig, undercooked, comes down in, the cyst comes out of dormancy, it's in our small intestine, the adults develop, or the cyst, the larva develops into the adults, they hang on to your intestinal tract, they are now reproducing, and they either can create larva that comes out in your poop, or the larva then embeds into your cyst and can be retained in your body. So the way it spreads to the next population is, for us, if it went out in our waste, our poop, then other animals can pick it up that way. In the case of the pig, they could pick it up by eating another infected animal. So I want you guys, again, to start thinking about creative ways to break this life cycle. How do we stop it? And what is the ideal way to break the life cycle of a parasite? All right, so be careful when you're eating pork. Make sure it's cooked completely. Risk is very low, but there's still a risk. All right, now here's a nasty one that some of us may have been infected with these things. They're called pinworms. Statistically, 30% of American kids and 16% of American adults have pinworm infections. So statistically, out of the semester, 24 of you sitting in that class, 30% of you. So roughly 1 out of, let's make it easy and go 1 out of 4. If there's 24 of you, that means 6 people were infected with pinworms at some point as a child. So the way it works, the pinworms tend to hang out in the intestinal tract, and then your digestive system moves them down to the end of the digestive tract, the back end here. And what we see happen, especially with kids, ooh, my backside itches, and little kids scratching their backside, and what does a little kid do? Oh, I'm going to smell my fingers, or I'm going to lick my fingers, and now they've just ingested the pinworm eggs or the pinworm larva, and that goes right back into their system. It goes in, it develops, it reproduces, and then it moves back through the digestive system, and it's back on the backside again. So you see a little kid scratching their behind, get them to wash their hands, wash their fingers really well, and break the cycle. Because if you just keep reinfecting yourself, you're never getting rid of these guys. Okay, so yeah, it's nasty. These are nasties. We'll talk about the nastiest one in the second part of the lecture here. This gets into Ascaris.